And right from the age of 11, I knew this is what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. Mom took me out one day and we were shopping for pants because I was very, very tall and pants didn't fit me. And after a disappointing day of not finding pants, we went out for lunch and she asked me kind of on a whim, have you started thinking about what you want to do when you're older? And I looked her dead in the eye and I said, I want to do what you do when I grow up. Oh, get a little choke, because somebody needs to tell the kids they're not stupid. And that's what I did. I've been an educational therapist now for 21 years, and it's everything I've ever wanted to do.
Hello and welcome to the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. We're here to help you navigate life while disrupting the status quo. Our discussions cover a number of topics relevant to everyday life. We discuss everything from relationships to entrepreneurship. We also engage in some difficult but important conversations. And now, here are your hosts, Brian and Tanya Hamilton.
Welcome to episode 33 of the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. We've partnered with MMC for this podcast episode. MMC seeks to create and promote neurodiverse products that safely stimulate and educate. Visit mymmc.ca to learn more and to see their selection. On this episode of the Disrupt the Everyday podcast, we're joined by Matthew Turton, Director at Breakthroughs in Learning. Matthew shares his experiences growing up with learning disabilities and how his mother, with years of research and a lot of money and time invested, figured out how to unlock his learning potential. Today, Matthew and his team are helping children and adults to overcome those same challenges. Another unique thing they're doing is helping individuals enhance their career prospects by unlocking their learning potential. Matthew, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's great to be here.
And I'm going to start off with the loaded, really deep question. Who is Matthew Turton?
Oh, well, that is complicated, isn't it? Who is Matthew Turton? Well, I like to joke and say I'm a survivor of learning disabilities. I grew up with 3 learning disabilities myself, and very grateful for my mother for dedicating years of her life to helping me overcome those. I'm a family man, coming up on 15 years of marriage. I'm a very proud father of a son and daughter who are 10 and 7, entrepreneur, and a funny man. I get that a lot too. So there you go. And tall. I'm 6'9". You can't tell on a podcast, but I'm 6'9". And if I don't duck when I go through a door, I get a concussion. So there you
go. Fair enough. Now, I actually wanted to talk about the company that you run, Breakthroughs in Learning. And I'm just curious, what was the origin story? What made you start this company? And I guess for everybody who's in the conversation with us today, what is Breakthroughs in Learning all about?
Sure. So Breakthroughs is kind of the love child of what I mentioned there, my mom's years of research. So I was born with 3 learning disabilities. My brother had 5, and school was rough. I couldn't write. I had really bad ADHD. Like someone at Cambridge Mental Health Hospital told me I was the worst case they'd ever seen. So, imagine that. And my mom was a psychiatric nurse and a teacher as well. She's from the age where, as a woman, if you wanted to go beyond high school, you had 2 options. You could be a nurse or you could be a teacher. And she said, screw it, I'm doing both. And that was just kind of how she lived her life. She was a classic overachiever. She just went for it full bore. And when she realized both my brother and I were struggling in school, she pulled both of us and decided that she would homeschool us. And that she homeschooled us for 10 years. And after the first 3 years, she realized that everything she'd learned as a psychiatric nurse and teacher wasn't working. And she hit the panic button and said, okay, I need to go outside of what I already know. And so for the next 7 years, she went to conferences, she went to trainings, she went to leaders in various fields. She traveled. There was no homeschool groups back then anywhere around Waterloo region. So she would drive to New York every month to go to a homeschool meeting. Like I said, overachiever. She went to California and Texas and Florida to meet with different psychologists and specialists and have us poked and prodded. And we did every kind of therapy you can imagine, and some you probably can't. And at some point in there, we had a woman from BC come and live with us for a while. And she had assessed both my brother and I, and she worked with us for a couple of months, and we started to make some progress. And she went back to BC and she trained my mom to continue working with us because it's not an overnight thing, right? That was a 5-year journey. of this woman training my mother. Her name was Elizabeth Allen. People started knocking on the front door of our house. Literally, a woman from around the corner knocked on the front door of the house and said, "Hey, I heard Mike, that's my brother's name. I heard Mike is starting to be able to read. You got to help my kid." And my mom said, "Well, I don't know how to help your kid. I was only trained how to help my kids." And she said, "And I'm just at the beginning of that." And the woman said, "Figure it out, because my kid needs help." And so they moved a little table into my room. They moved me into the basement, and my mom created, you can't see that I'm doing air quotes, my mom created an office. It was a painted dining room table in a room, and kids from around the neighborhood started coming for help. And I went from writing 3 sentences in an hour. So I had dysgraphia, I had an expressive language disorder. Both of those things mean that writing was really tough. Like in grade 10, I could write 3 sentences in an hour. So my kid in grade 2 can do more than that, right? And I went from writing 3 sentences in an hour to writing a full page in 15 minutes. It was a really, really good day. We had a pizza party when my dad got home. It was January 25th of my grade 10 year. And every January 25th, I still celebrate. I bring pizza in for everybody at the office, all the clients, and we have a little party. Never looked back, went on to graduate high school, college, university on the honor roll with no accommodations. And gradually it just kind of snowballed and it grew. And mom eventually moved out, got a legit office and started hiring staff. And right from the age of 11, I knew this is what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. Mom took me out one day and we were shopping for pants because I was very, very tall and pants didn't fit me. And after a disappointing day of not finding pants, we went out for lunch. And she asked me kind of on a whim, have you started thinking about what you want to do when you're older? And I looked her dead in the eye and I said, I want to do what you do when I grow up. Oh, get a little choked, because somebody needs to tell the kids they're not stupid. And that's what I did. I've been an educational therapist now for 21 years. And it's everything I've ever wanted to do. And I took over the company from my mom about 6 years ago. She passed 3 years ago. And now there is 12 of us on staff, and we work with people from 4 years old all the way through to 64. It's not like if you're 65, we can't help you, it just rhymes. And we have clients, we're based in Waterloo region, but we have clients around the region, Toronto, Hamilton, London, and all the way across North America and even into Europe. So I get to travel and speak to both parents and teacher conferences and do exactly what I wanted to do, help kids around the world. And it's amazing.
No, it's awesome. And it's an awesome story. And, you're an awesome example for children who are experiencing similar troubles, right? Similar challenges, because, as you had mentioned, you were told that you had a very severe case, and, now you're obviously very successful. You're able to help people who are in that same boat and running a company that's really making an impact and making a difference.
People ask me, if you could undo it, would you? And I said, that's not a fair question because it was hell. I mean, it was hell. So I don't want to answer that question. I don't know what I would do, but I do know that the fact that that's what I went through has put me in a position to help lots of people. And so that's the part that I appreciate. And when I sit down across the desk from an adult who struggled with this their whole life, and it's affected their self-esteem, it's affected their career opportunities, it's affected their ability to parent. Or I sit across from a kid in grade 8 and they're ready to drop out of school because they've been told they're stupid their whole lives. The fact that I can relate at some level, it's always different. Everybody's case is their own, and I can't pretend to understand the intricacies of that. But just the fact that I've been on that side of the desk, I have been the one that has struggled, I have been the one that felt stupid. It goes a long way to giving them hope, for sure.
Absolutely. No, I'm curious to know, because it's hard to have the perspective, I guess, unless you actually lived it. But what is it like for a child when there is I guess we'll use the example of ADHD, because you had mentioned that. What is it that's happening differently in your mind, prior to doing any therapy? Like, what is a kid going through when they have that diagnosis?
Sure. ADHD is a really interesting diagnosis. There's lots of folklore and misconception about it. And a large part of that is due to, it's not one thing. It's a collection of symptoms, and you only have to have a certain number of them every so often in order to get the diagnosis. So you could have 30 kids in the room with ADHD, and each one of them would have very different symptoms and would have very different pathology, or their parents would describe their struggles very differently. And so that what that leads to is, one child who, daydreams. That person's parent looks over at Jimmy across the street, who's the little terror, me running around the classrooms singing Kumbaya. And they're like, well, if Matthew has ADHD, if that's what ADHD is, then my kid doesn't have ADHD because my kid looks nothing like that. So there comes a whole lot of confusion around that, which I run into a lot on Facebook groups. So I can answer from my perspective what ADHD was like for me. I was diagnosed with being able to follow 9 different trains of thought at the same time, which sounds like a superpower, but it was more like a runaway freight train. And I describe it to kids like, imagine 9 different TVs on a wall and somebody else is channel surfing. And it was just constant barrage of information and an inability to control what information was important. And it was a running joke among my family and my friends that I would use what's called non sequiturs. It's Latin for not connected. And so somebody would say something about the color blue, and I would make 13 leaps of and I would say something about winter's coming, and they're like, what are you talking about? I was like, well, blue is Blue Jays play in the summer. The other Toronto team is the Toronto Maple Leafs. Their color is blue, but they only play in the winter. Man, winter's going to be here soon. And they're like, I was talking about painting my walls blue. What? And so that can lead to some funny looks if people can't keep up with that train of thought. For parents, it's often distractibility. This is the 8th time I've asked you to brush your teeth in under 2 minutes. And often it comes down to a competition for the child's attention. And if you're a teacher, you're going to lose most of the time because, they're dreaming about race cars and rainbows, and you're talking about Pythagorean theorem. And I love math, don't get me wrong, but it's really hard to compete with race cars and rainbows. Or Minecraft. If you're my kid, he's really into Minecraft kick. And as a parent, if they're playing a video game and you don't get their attention, they're not hearing anything you're saying. Nothing. The fire alarm could be going off and they're not going to be hearing it. So like I said, every kid is different, but that was certainly it for me. I would hyper focus, and that's one of the symptoms I still have. My wife and I have an agreement that if she doesn't get my attention first, whatever she said afterwards, I'm not liable to follow through on. If I'm reading, like, you could be standing in front of me having a full-on conversation and I don't even know you're there. But I've also been able to leverage that so that I can do that now at work on demand. So I will sit down to do a task and I'll blink, and it's been 3 hours and the job's done. So it's actually a good thing. I've learned to leverage that really well. The only downside is that I have to have my office manager check in to make sure I eat because sometimes it'll be like, why do I feel so horrible? I'm like, oh, it's 6 p.m. and I haven't had lunch yet. So other than that, it's great, but the mind of someone struggling with ADHD is messy. It's just, it's hard to find the information you need when you need it. It's hard to stay focused. It's hard to do the thing you just agreed that you were going to do. You tend to procrastinate, tend to get distracted, and trying harder doesn't help.
No, fair enough. And it seems like a little bit of what happens is, I guess, just kind of a reframing of the abilities, because like you had mentioned, a lot of what you were dealing with, just with all of the things taking you all over the place. It seems like you've been able to really, through all the years of therapy, really hyper focus now and really use that to your advantage.
Yeah. And I should maybe define the word therapy. Therapy isn't, Freud sitting on a couch and telling me all your problems. It's like an occupational therapy, like a rehabs. I talk to the kids, I say, I went to physio rehab for my ankle when I broke it, and they helped me to strengthen and target and develop those muscles so that they were more functional. And that's what we do too, is we help you exercise, target, and develop muscles in your brain so that they're more functional and that you can do the things you want to do with less struggle. That's our goal. And so there are a combination of taking an area of weakness and learning how to kind of avoid it where possible. So some things would be like, hey, if writing's rough for you, maybe typing's better, right? So there's some aspects of kind of workarounds, or I don't really like to use the word crutches, but it is a little bit of that. But then ultimately, so that kind of helps in the short term. If you have poor short-term memory, let's say, write it down, right? That'll help you in the short term with the short-term pain, the short-term struggle. But ultimately, long-term, we want to develop that short-term memory so that you can just function, because you're not always going to be able to write it down. You're not always going to be able to, in school, for me, they would say, if you have trouble writing, have somebody else write it for you, right? You just speak it and they'll scribe it. Well, I don't know too many jobs where they'll do that for you until you're the top dog, and then you're fine. But a lot of the kids we work with have IEPs. Many of them don't, but certainly a lot of them do. An IEP is an individualized education program that will give them some accommodations or modifications, like have somebody else write for you. And those are great to help reduce stress and help the child feel that they can be successful in the short term in that class, and hopefully help them to maintain a positive relationship with education. Education is tough enough for kids that are doing well, let alone the kids that are struggling. So let's help them feel successful, but also in the long term, give them the skills that they need to be successful out in the real world. And so it's kind of a two-pronged approach that we take.
I like that. So you focus on the clientele aspect. So you mentioned from age 4 up to 64. So you talked a little bit about the children in the younger ages. Now, what services can you provide, or do you provide, for adults, like in the workplace, or even adults who are in post-secondary?
Sure, yeah. So it's the same sort of philosophy, the same sort of programming, just done at their level. So we'll have people looking at re-entering the workforce, and they know, hey, I've got to up my game a little bit. It's a more competitive workforce. Or, I haven't cracked a book in 10 years, and now I'm looking at going back to school. Ugh, right? Probably one of the most inspiring people I've met in my post-secondary career was a 73-year-old woman who decided to get a history degree just because she could. I was like, that's awesome. You go for it. So we certainly get a lot of requests with memory. As you age, it's natural for memory to decline a bit. So we get lots of requests for that. And just problem solving skills, comprehension. If you've been out of the workforce for a while, there is an aspect of use it or lose it. And if you haven't used critical logistical thinking skills in a while, and it depends what you've been doing, sometimes managing the grocery list and meal plan, that's critical logistical skills, right? But if you haven't been doing some of that stuff, or it's in a different skill area that you need, it can, you need to refresh some of those skills. Or we also work with people sometimes like post-concussion. So I had a concussion in my early 20s. I ran into a 300-pound man at full speed. I do not recommend it. Playing baseball, it hurt. I woke up, my extremities were tingling. I used to be a lifeguard. I woke up, my toes and my fingers were tingling, and I was like, I just broke my spine. I was face down in the grass, and fortunately I was okay. But absolutely, my short-term memory was shot. And I would, it's common to like call someone and not wait, forget a digit. I would be in the middle of calling someone and be like, who am I calling and why? It was that bad. And funny enough, it took me a couple of months to realize, wait a minute, this is what I do for a day job. What am I doing? And then actually take myself into the clinic and to work on it. But my short-term memory came right back within a couple of months, and I was good to go. So adults come for a variety of reasons. Sometimes they want to switch careers, and they want to, move to something that takes a completely different skill set and work on that. Some people have just struggled their whole lives. We get a lot of parents who they send a kid to us, and then during the feedback process, they're like, whoa, I have some of these challenges too. Can you help me with that? I'm like, yes, we can. And there's a family discount. They're like, good. So, yeah. And spouses, it affects your relationship. So if you have a poor short-term memory, I promise you there's arguments. If you have listening comprehension issues, I promise one of you is pissed off at the other because you didn't comprehend what just happened in that conversation, and you're going to misinterpret it. So we kind of do some marriage counseling light sometimes based on the results. And that's always fun to watch the eyebrows arc and looking at each other like, oh yeah, how does he know that happens in our house? And I'm like, I'll put this right here on the paper. I get a lot of comments of where were you 30 years ago when I was the kid crying in the corner at school. And there's a lot of trauma that comes with it. For me, writing was my huge problem, right? And because of that, spelling was really rough. And I worked on it. Once writing came along, I worked on my spelling, and it came up to about average, and I was happy with that. I moved on. But if you want my inner Hulk to come out fastest, make fun of my spelling. And I have fat thumbs, so sometimes when I'm texting, I'll screw something up, and someone will make a haha that I spelled something wrong, and immediately that inner child that's still hurt is just whoosh right there immediately, and I'm that hurt little kid again. And they're just making a little comment, right? Whatever, it's no big deal. They're my friend, and I insult them too. But for me, that's a wound, right? And that's I've now been a good speller for over 20 years, and that wound is still there. So for these adults who are still struggling with focus, memory, comprehension, problem solving, judgment skills, the wound isn't remotely healed. It's still something to struggle with every day. And adults are some of my favorite people to work with because they're aggressively committed. They're like, I put up with this for 40 years. I'm done. I'll do whatever you want. You want me to do jumping jacks? I'll do jumping jacks. Backflips? I'll do backflips. I'm like, well, we don't do either of those here. And they're like, I don't care. Just tell me what to do, and I'm in. And I'm like, okay, let's go. I get invited to weddings. The relationship you develop with these people are really special. I've got one guy who has had 3 children, and within a week of each of his child being born, he brings them down for me to hold his little baby. Within a week of them being born, and he's coming in from Milton, so that's about an hour drive, because I helped him to radically change his life, and he wants me to be part of his family and for his family to meet me, and that's something special.
Yeah, that's definitely special. And I think that's the nice thing about a family-run business too, right? Like you just have just that little extra interaction, special interaction, communication, and people feel comfortable because they're being probably one of the most vulnerable times and situations in their lives is coming into your office, right?
Yeah, I hear all the time stories from parents saying things like, we can't talk to anybody about this, or they would think we're horrible parents. And it's not about their parenting skills, their child really struggling. And a lot of the kids that we work with have behavioral issues, because if you go to school every day knowing you're going to fail and feeling there's a gun to your head, you don't have an option. If we're adults and we suck at our job, guess what? We can quit. We can go find something else that we're not as bad at. But if you're 8 years old, you're going to school every day for a very long time, regardless of how well you do. And you know that. And you can certainly start to develop some attitude and behavioral challenges from that, for sure. And I certainly did. I got angry. Other kids, they pull it in and they withdraw. I was angry. I was angry at God, parents, teachers, myself, anybody I could point a finger at. It's really tough. And for the parents to sit down and share those stories, for an adult to sit down and share, hey, I was, quote, the dumb kid in class. And yeah, I've made it. Some of them haven't made it, but the one I'm thinking about right now specifically, he's like, yeah, okay, I've made it. I'm the CEO of a big company, but I can't read above grade 6. I have to have my lawyer read all the documents to me because I don't get it. That takes a lot of courage to admit. And what I like is our whole focus is, I joke, I say, hey, you know what? You can go anywhere and get an assessment that tells you have a problem. A Facebook quiz will tell you that. Our focus is the then what. We have a lot of people that come to us. They've had psych ed tests or this test or that test, and there is no then what. You'll get a diagnosis. Okay, here's your diagnosis. And, I have people say, and then I ask the psychologist, then what? And the psychologist says, well, here's your diagnosis, here's your accommodations. That's the then what. But what do we actually do about the problem? Well, there's nothing. That's not what we do. But that breakthroughs in learning, that is what we do. Our focus is the then what. Let's actually do something about it so that we can give your kid or yourself as an adult the skills to be successful.
And I was just thinking that, so, you're in school, there, you see a student, your child is struggling. First usually comes the IEP, then, parents sometimes, and the students who are almost led to have that false hope that, okay, this accommodation or whatever this is going to help the situation. And then a couple months into the school year, situation really isn't all that helped, right? And then you have children not wanting to go to school, parents frustrated. Then maybe they think, okay, they need a tutor. Then you start with the tutoring, and that's not working either. So just from talking to you and even like looking at your website and reading, it's like, this is the solution that even before the tutoring should be happening, right? Not saying that tutoring, shouldn't happen, but I think then you come up with that game plan of, okay, what actually really needs to get done? Maybe it's not even the academic piece. Maybe if we can solve A, B, and C, the academics would just come on their own, right?
Absolutely. Teachers, I have such a heart for teachers. They have a really difficult job. I know many of them personally, professionally, and they're struggling to keep up. IEPs, there's so many IEPs in their classroom now. I was talking to a teacher the other day. They have 10 kids on IEP in their class. It's not a special class, it's just an unusual class, 10 kids with IEPs. And on average, an IEP has like 8 to 10 accommodations. So that's 100 things that teacher is supposed to be keeping track of. I don't care if you're a super teacher of the year. It's just not going to happen. And so people think that the IEP will solve the problem, and it'll help. IEPs are good. I advocate for IEPs to help the kid feel more successful in class. But you need to be very careful what you put on that list and to prioritize the most important things. Because if you just, throw it up on the wall, all on the wall, and see what sticks, not very much. And then tutors are great. We refer people to tutors all the time once they have the cognitive skills to be successful. Tutors are great for if you missed some concepts in math, and they just need to go over them again or from a different perspective because your learning style is different than the teaching style or whatever. But if you have poor listening comprehension, going over it 100 more times isn't going to fix the problem if you have listening comprehension issues. So the example I always use for tutoring is, let's say you're struggling with your times tables. It's slowing you down in school. So you can go and you can study your times tables with a tutor or with your mom or dad. And then as soon as you stop that times table and you move on to the next one, you lose that times table. So you were doing the 5 times table, you got it locked. You move to the 6 times tables, you lose the 5 times table. Well, it's probably a long-term memory issue you have. And it could be other things, but that's statistically most likely. And so as soon as you move something out of your short-term memory into your long-term memory, it starts to fall through the sieve. And tutoring isn't going to be able to help that. Rehearsing it every night isn't going to be able to help that. What we need to do is actually go and develop that long-term memory so that you can go be successful in class. You can go be successful with the tutor. And once you have the skills, the cognitive skills to be successful, then you can go off and actually be successful. But until those building blocks are in place, you don't build a house on a shaky foundation. And often I see that's what people do, and they're working on the 3rd story. I'm like, why are you having an algebra tutor? You don't know how to add to 10. And because you don't have the cognitive skills in place to grasp, place numbers and place values and just the very foundation of numbers. And we're working up here in the penthouse. We got to go back to the beginning. And sometimes there's denial or an emotional component to saying, I'm in grade 9. I shouldn't have to go back to the beginning. And I get it. I've been there. I was in grade 10 and I couldn't write 3 sentences. So I get it. But going back to the beginning is going to take you to where you want to go. So sometimes that's what you got to do.
Now, the thing that I'm kind of curious of is just with regards to, you mentioned diagnoses and the treatment plan that you may get from from a physician. Now, typically when people are coming in, is there already medication involved? And, will that be part of a therapy plan? Or are you working with a lot of clients free of any medications that would typically be prescribed? I'm just curious about that piece.
Sure, yeah, both. We have people all across the spectrum. So we have people that have been on medication, it's working well for them. We have people that have tried medication, it hasn't worked well for them. We have people that have never tried medication. We have the whole gamut. And I like to joke that I'm medication agnostic. On the fence for the right person. If it's a good fit and it works well, awesome. And if you can't find a good fit and it doesn't work well, okay. So I give full 2-day seminars on ADHD, and medication is always a contentious topic that comes up, and that always turns into an interesting conversation. But for the right person, it can work really well, and sometimes it doesn't. And we're there to help either way.
Right now, question that I have that is usually difficult for people to answer when I put it in this context, but probably a bit easier for you because you get to have a similar experience every day in your work. But, knowing what you know now, if you could go back and have a conversation with, say, your 8-year-old self, what would you tell yourself at that point?
Ooh, so much. Buy Apple stocks. Um, what would I tell my 8-year-old self? Getting choked up. It's gonna be okay. Yeah, it's gonna be okay. And I've watched enough movies to know not to mess with the time-space continuum. But as much as I joked earlier about not a fair question, would I go through it again? I think I kind of would have to. Certainly, I think there's ways it could have been easier, but even the internet wasn't a thing when I was a kid growing up, right? So my mom was doing this research by going to seminars, by going to the library. It was all old school, and it's just the way that it had to happen, I guess. But what I'd tell my 8-year-old self would be, it's going to be okay, and don't give up. Even though I did hundreds of times. And my mom was a pit bull. Like, she decided that she wasn't going to give up on my brother and I, and she just didn't. I'd be like, "That's it. I quit. I'm out." And she's like, "That's nice. Do it anyways." And she just refused to give up. And I would all to her for sure.
When you were you and your brother were kids and all this was happening, I know it must have been interesting in the house. Like, I'm sure your dad had to be super supportive of all this, because your mom was just kind of buried in finding a way to make things better for the two of you.
Yeah, my dad was a social worker. My parents used to joke that God couldn't have picked better parents for the two of us, my brother and I. Although they felt wickedly unequipped the whole time. Don't get me wrong. My parents estimated that they spent about $100,000 on our therapy, and they did not have that money. We were not rich by any means. My dad was a social worker, barely making a little over minimum wage. My mom wasn't working because she was homeschooling the two of us. I remember we used to have garage sales because we needed curriculum for the coming year, and collecting beer bottles and cans and you name it. My dad worked part-time in the evenings and weekends as a painter, a house painter, to come up with the money to make it work. So it certainly wasn't an easy ride. And both my brother and I were less than exemplar children, to say the least. We were constantly into trouble, constantly causing problems. And my brother had ADHD too, and a number of other things. And looking back now as an adult and a parent of my own kids, and whenever I'm like having a bad day, I just remember my childhood and be like, this is a freaking cakewalk. I honestly have no comprehension of how my parents made it through. I remember many times waking up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, 1, 2 a.m. and my mom was on the couch researching. So the story goes that she read for between 1 to 3 hours a day, every day, 7 days a week for 3 years, researching how to help my brother and I. And I would wake up and she would be on the couch crying, because what she had hoped would be the next answer, the next piece of the puzzle, was a swing and a miss. And it wasn't going to work the way that she wanted it to. And certainly I was like I said, I was everything you think of worst case ADHD. I was that kid. I was running around, goofball. My dad used to call me an orangutan because I had fiery red hair. And I remember one day my dad came home. He opened the front door, and I was literally running laps: living room, kitchen, dining room, living room, kitchen, dining room, living room, kitchen, dining room. I don't know, I must have been about 7. And he totally did the meme where the person just shrinks back through the hedge. He just stepped back outside the house and closed the front door. And he's just like, nope. And he just like, I'm out. And he just went out to the garage, because sometimes I had to run off the energy, and it was just best to let that happen and not try to intervene. And yeah, my parents went through a lot, but they never gave up on my brother or I. And I should say that my brother was told by 2 psychologists in grade 3 he would never read, he would never write, he would never hold a job, he would maybe get some skills to a grade 5 level. And my mom was in Burlington when she got that diagnosis, and she remembers sobbing in her car and in the parking lot. And the next thing she remembers is sobbing in the driveway. And she suddenly snapped to and realized she'd just driven 45 minutes with no awareness and it's the same thing as me. She went through the process, and it took years, but he went on to read and write at adult levels. He went way past grade 5, and he became the head of installation services for Southern Ontario for Home Depot. So he was managing all Southern Ontario installation crews. And, so he certainly jokes, well, I sure showed them, and that kind of thing. And he loves to talk about breakthroughs and what I do. And I have his full permission to share his story. And he's a great advocate for what we do, not necessarily in a way that I condone at all. So he comes up in the roofing and framing trade, and they have a certain vernacular and a way of speaking to each other. Sometimes he'll be just like, one of the guys on his crews or whatever, he'll just be like, dude, you are messed up. You need to go see my brother and he'll fix you right. And he gives him my business card. I'm like, you can't do that. Don't do that. I mean, I don't mind helping them, but you can't frame it like that.
Literally frame it.
Yeah.
I actually had a couple of questions here. So what, after this conversation, for parents who have been listening, now they're wondering, okay, what are my next steps? I got to get in contact with Breakthroughs in Learning. Is there something, what should they do?
Mm-hmm.
Steps.
Well, if you're a parent out there listening and you're wondering if Breakthroughs could help your child, I would love to have a conversation with you. We offer a free consultation. You can go to our website, breakthroughsinlearning.com, and there's buttons all over the place to have a free consultation where I can get a better feel for what your child is struggling with, and you can get a feel for how Breakthroughs could help you with that. And if you're wondering are my child's struggles significant enough to get help? The answer is yes. If you're having that question already, yes, because the emotional pain, and your kid might not be aware of it yet. That's personally my favorite time to deal with the problem. The younger, the better, before the kid has had the emotional trauma. Yes, I love working with the adults, but it's also heartbreaking. So if your child, in grade 1 and have no idea that they're struggling, you're the one looking at the report card and hiding it from them, get help now. There's also a warning signs checklist on our website where you can go through and you can check out what are some warning signs that my child needs help based on age. But I'd love to have a conversation with you and see how we can help you or your child.
That sounds good. And I guess just in terms of the virtual perspective, I know obviously the Kitchener-Waterloo area, fairly accessible, but for people outside of that area, and I guess you had mentioned even Europe. So I'm assuming even just for an initial assessment, that could be done virtually as well?
So we've been working with people virtually for about a decade. So we were ready when COVID hit. There's a smaller group of people that we can help virtually. So if you're on the far end spectrum of some pretty severe behavioral issues, let's say, we might not be able to do that. If you can't sit for more than 2 seconds, okay, virtual might not be a great option. But you'll probably have a feeling for how your child can function virtually just from the last year, right, of doing it in school. Now, that being said, we are very different than school. So if your child struggled to do school virtually, there's actually a good chance that we would be able to help them virtually, because what we do is nothing like school. But we've been helping people virtually, like I said, as far away as the EU. And so we have clients across North America. And our goal is to make everything that we do tolerable to fun. I say to the kids, we're going to throw in some games, we're going to throw in some unexpected, unless you struggle with the unexpected, then we won't. Our goal is always to set our students up for success. So our model is based around doing whatever we need to do to help them be successful. And so lots of our clients come in person, lots of our clients come virtually, and it's whatever works best for them.
Awesome. And in terms of breakthroughs in learning, what can we expect in the months to come?
Oh, a vacation would be nice. We are looking at, so we have program Top Secret that'll probably be launching sometime this fall. It's going to be aimed at helping youth at risk. So low income youth at risk. That'll be exciting. We've got a new reading program we're implementing right now, actually. We're actually hiring right now too, because we've got a backlog. So we need probably two new therapists, which is always an exciting problem to have. One of my big commitments is, if you come to me for help and I tell you that we can help, I don't want to say, and we've got a 6-month waiting list. Because once I give you that hope that we can help you, I'm not okay making you, sit and twiddle your thumbs for 6 months. So we're committed to helping you as fast as possible. So that's kind of what we got coming up. We got some new staff coming in. We've got a new program coming in, a new reading program. And we're always on the hunt for what's new, what's working, and critically evaluating all our tools. We have, I don't even know, at last count it was around 350 different tools, resources, programs, apps, workbooks, computer programs that we use, because we work with such a wide variety of people. So we're always evaluating which programs, which tools are most effective for which kind of client, and always on the hunt for something new.
I like that. And I think right now, being summer, this would be an ideal time for us parents to look into this, to, whether it be the intake and get that ball rolling, right? To hopefully, I know, like you said, you're looking for staff, so maybe a little bit of a wait, but at least to get the ball rolling for your child come September, right? So there could maybe be a game plan in place or something to look forward to, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Summer is one of the best times because your brain has less cognitive load. So there's less demands placed on it. So we love summertime. And even, I did joke about a wait list. It's a very short wait list, but even if you're on the wait list, often I'll give people, we have a lending library of tools and resources and games. I'll be like, here, your child's primary concern right now is listening comprehension. Here's 2 games that work on listening comprehension. Play them as a family for 5 minutes, 3 times a week. Let's get the ball rolling. And we'll get you in for therapy starting next month or something like that. So like I said, I'm pretty committed to, as soon as we know there's a problem, doing something about it and getting you help.
That's awesome.
Yeah, awesome stuff. Now, for anybody who's listening to our conversation and are interested in services, how do we reach out? How do we get in touch with you or Breakthroughs in Learning?
Absolutely. So the first way would be breakthroughsinlearning.com. Check out our website there. If you like the phone, then you'll want to speak with Andrea. She's fantastic. She's our office manager. You can reach her at 519-888-6697. If you want to reach out to me personally, you can email me at matthew@breakthroughsinlearning.com. Nice and simple, matthew@breakthroughsinlearning.com. And I'd love to support you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Matthew. We appreciate the time, and we really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you.
It was a lot of fun. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening to the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. For more ways to listen, connect with us on social media. To be a guest or to partner with us, check out our link tree at Disrupt the Everyday. Join us next time for more ways to disrupt the everyday.